This is a production of Cornell University.
Hope you're all having a wonderful, amazing Wednesday. I'm Lucia Viñale. I'm the organizer of the webinar this year. I am a third-year PhD candidate in the Larry Smart Lab at Cornell University, where I'm working on hemp powder mildew. We have two featured speakers for today, Chadwick White and Kim Mayo. They are joining us from Colorado. Chadwick White is the Chief Visionary Officer, Chief Innovation Officer, and Co-Founder of Nepra Foods, a leader in allergen-free and plant-based food and ingredient solutions. With over 35 years of experience in the food industry, he holds a Master Baker certification and has pioneered innovations in gluten-free and hemp-based formulations. Chadwick co-founded Udi's gluten-free food, growing it to over 125 million in revenue before its acquisition by Boulder Brands. Kimberly Mayo is an experienced registered dietitian and accountant manager with a strong background in nutrition science and regulatory compliance within the CPG food industry. After working in hospital and community education settings, she wanted to improve the food options available on store shelves. Getting diagnosed with celiac disease in 2010, she only strengthened her passion about improving the nutrient density of gluten and allergen-free foods, which began her path to working with Nepra. Thank you for coming. Before they start sharing their experiences and insights, I want to remind everyone to use the chat for greetings and other communications, but please submit the questions for Chadwick and Kim using the Q&A button. The talk would last approximately 30 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. We'll then wrap up and thank them for their time and insights. All webinars are recorded and uploaded to our School of Integrative Plant Science, SIPS, YouTube channel. Feel free to check out the previous ones. Chadwick, Kim, our virtual stage is all yours.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for attending. This is exciting for us. I have a lot to share on hemp and how it performs in food. Seems to be a new category for many. I think the features and the understanding and the interest in hemp in the past has been around cannabinoids and fiber. So I'm excited to show what the seed, the protein specifically from the seed, does in food formulations. And again, I'm incredibly excited about this. It's an amazingly versatile ingredient. I'm going to start sharing my screen and kind of go through presentation that we put together. I'm going to kind of just, it's mostly a collection of photographs, and I'm going to just start explaining a little bit about what we do. So as Lucia had mentioned, I'm a certified master baker. I've been in the bakery industry for 37 years this year. And I started off in conventional bakery. In 1998, I got certified. I got my certification as a master baker. 2001, I moved to Colorado. A couple of years later, I met a woman with severe food allergies, and she introduced me to the free-from market. Previous to that, I had really had no exposure to it. I specialized in product development, so I immediately started formulating products for her and for her children who were both celiac. A few years later, this really changed the course of my career. A couple of years later, I had a full suite of formulations and started looking for business partners to bring those to market. Met a couple of guys here in Colorado, Udi and Itai Barone, and we started a company called Udi's Gluten Free Foods. And I learned a tremendous amount during that experience. One was that we really needed to work more on the specific ingredients available for bakers baking gluten-free products. The ingredients had to be designed specifically for gluten-free. The other thing was that we needed much better nutrition. And the formulations at that time, even though they were decent, they could be better. And so, post Udi's, I started a company called Gluten Free Baking Solutions. That was in 2016. that company and a couple of others, a sprouting and malting company and a blending company, all got rolled together into what is today Nepra Foods. So Nepra is actually an adjective. It is Esperanto. It means absolutely essential. And that's really how we view what we do every single day. We don't just create ingredients for the greater market. We also create formulations, and we really center around better for you and nutritious eating. So with me today is Kim. She is our registered dietitian, our project manager, our account manager, our everything. She is actually our internal rock star. So I'm super excited to have her here. I'll go through some of the applications of the hemp in food, and then I'll pass it over to Kim at the last half to kind of discuss the nutrition a little bit more at length, because there's a lot to unpack there as well. So obviously, we'll go over these points here in just a few minutes. What our general mission is, why we're so interested in hemp, and then some of the characteristics of hemp, its versatility, the functionality, what foods it's really suited well for, and then some CPG brands that are starting to launch into the market today with hemp included. And then, of course, those things that Kim will address, the nutrition, and then some of the other things that we'd love to see moving forward from institutions like Cornell, as they put together their hemp programs. We have some requests, some things that we would like to see, done in the future. So Nepra, we really are interested in making food for everyone, allergen-free foods that taste great, that there's nothing lacking, right? We don't want our consumers to feel like, they're getting less. And so we've really concentrated on world-class foods. My brother, for instance, is a part of our company, and he was a sous chef at the French Laundry. And we've taken some of that high-level expertise and incorporated that into what we do, every day here in terms of developing new food products. Similarly, we develop formulations for brands globally, and our primary objective is to make these foods absolutely delicious, but then to back that up with a really great nutritional profile, so that, a lot of times some of these individuals that have celiac disease and some other autoimmune diseases, they really are lacking in certain nutrients. And so we really make a strong effort to bring these things, incorporate them into the foods that we're producing. So, one of the bullet points here, deliver nutrition without compromise. And that really kind of sums it up. The other thing that we're really doing that I think is important, it's this last bullet point, it's standardizing the ingredients that are used in allergen-free baking. You think about wheat flour, for instance. Wheat is highly standardized for protein content, quality of protein, damaged starch levels, enzyme activity, all these, characteristics that become very important for a food producer to be able to produce consistent products. Well, many gluten-free ingredients don't enjoy that same level of standardization. And so Nepra is really working on that as well. And hemp definitely plays a role here. And what we're trying to do is as we work through the various extractions of hemp protein, we look at what we can do to standardize that ingredient so that other food producers know exactly how to use it and what forms of the protein they should be looking for. So why hemp? I think, first of all, I would say the nutrition is outstanding. Kim will speak to that in a few minutes. But from my standpoint, it's the absolute versatility of the ingredient. If you see that picture on the side here, we've got a few different items. That in the middle is a hemp heart flour that we produce internally. We've got toasted hemp seeds. We have the hemp seed oil in the very back, and on the left is actually a hemp margarine. So lots of different components within the seed itself. We're talking about a pretty significant amount of protein. You've got an outer shell. Once the shell has come off, then you've got a hemp heart. The heart itself is about 50% oil. It's about 34% protein, and then you've got smaller fractions of starch and fiber. And then you've got a really great ash content, lots of minerals. What's interesting is that once you get the oil out of the way, once you've extracted the oil, and how you extract it too is very important. You want to make sure that you're not damaging the protein during the oil extraction process. A lot of protein producers will use a screw press with the hull on. There's some negatives to doing that. One, you end up, the high pressures involved in those systems denature the hemp protein to an extent. And then you get, tannins and chlorophyll and some other things that penetrate the protein, and those become very difficult to get out. And as a result, the proteins that you see in those types of systems are green. They are slightly bitter. They have very limited functionality in terms of structure building properties, those types of things. And as a consequence, they don't tend to be very usable in food systems. And so what we've really done is identify the best ways to extract the protein and enhance its functionality. So what we're doing basically is dehulling the seed first, and then we're going through a solvent-based, we're going through a pressing stage, kind of liquefying the hearts, and then we're going through a separation process, being highly cognizant of the protein's functionality and trying to preserve that. The end result is a protein that is white in color, slightly sweet and nutty, and it has this amazing functionality, very similar to whole eggs, which is incredible because it's that level of functionality that will allow for all the foods that I'll kind of go through. And we've kind of centered on bakery items, but we got a few others in there as well. So because it's white in color, obviously there's no negative impact to a bakery formulation. I'm not turning my breads green, which is good. The slight, the very palatable flavor. It's like when I say sweet and nutty, I mean it. There's a subtle sweetness to the protein. It's nutty and it's quite pleasant just by itself. But again, that really lends itself well to formulation because you don't have to cover over any odd flavors. I work with plant-based proteins across the board, potato protein, canola protein, both of which taste terrible but have great functionality. You think about pea protein, limited functionality. It's got a decent gel, but doesn't have a lot of other properties, tends to be somewhat chalky. Soy obviously has some problems in that, it carries the allergen. These, as hemp relates back to each one of these, in my opinion, it is the king. And as we talk about the hemp industry and where it's going, it is my humble opinion that hemp protein and hemp foods will be the first multi-billion-dollar hemp industry. And I hope that some of these images and some of this conversation really kind of illustrate why that is, or why I think that will be. So here in these pictures, we've got on the left here, we've got a textured hemp protein that we've manufactured. If you look, so this is high pressure extrusion. This is just hemp by itself. And when you extrude the hemp, you can see that it forms these really nice textures. When this is wet again, those textures are very reminiscent of chicken structures, like chicken protein structures. Also, interestingly, because of we've got a really fundamentally in hemp, you've got an amazing amino complex. That amino complex is very high in glutamine. And glutamine, as we know, is the primary amino acid responsible for umami flavor. So within the hemp, when we extrude it, it sounds like popcorn in the factory. It's like pop, 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 but it smells like turkey. And it's the most bizarre thing. But when you rehydrate this protein, the natural flavor is meat. You can't identify what it is, but you want to call it a poultry. So it's very interesting from that standpoint. That kind of leads into the next slide where we've made a mayonnaise. So this mayonnaise is really just hemp. It is hemp protein with a clarified hemp oil. So we actually remove the gums and waxes from the oil. And then we create internally an enzyme hydrolyzed hemp amino. That liquid amino we standardize at 12% saline. We can dilute it down to about 6% and it'll still be stable at room temperature. But that amino liquid, the umami flavor is absolutely outstanding. It's amazing. And so this mayonnaise, we add a little bit of that hydrolyzed hemp amino liquid back in for some umami flavor, but then also to satisfy the need for the salt in the formula. And then we add a little bit of vinegar and lemon juice just to, bring the acidity down a little bit. The result is a product that tastes just like Hellmann's mayonnaise. It is absolutely incredible. The flavor is so good. And this picture also has our gluten-free bread featured. That bread, we use the hemp protein as the primary egg replacement. Of course, in gluten-free baking, we don't have gluten, obviously. And so we end up usually using eggs for the protein structure. Excuse me. So hemp, because it replaces eggs in literally every bakery formula that I've tried it in, it does an amazing job of helping create this backbone and this structure. Further comment here that I think is very cool and important to bakers. Egg whites, if I were to use egg whites in this formulation for our bread, and I should back up a little bit. We have a gluten-free bread technology that we've developed that uses some of our proprietary starches and some of our other ingredients, but then it also uses our hemp protein egg replacers. If I were to make that formulation with egg whites, that product would only get about 21 days of ambient shelf life, stay soft and flexible. But the egg whites actually have a drying effect on the crumb structure. By using hemp protein, I'm able to get an additional 10 days of shelf life out of that product, primarily because of the globular nature of the hemp. Hemp protein is roughly 65% globulin, a specific globular protein called edestin, and 35% albumin. The albumins and the globulins are both highly soluble in combination. The albumin's fully soluble, the globulins to about 70% give or take. But because the globular proteins are so efficient at binding water, that moisture is bound up in the product for a long period of time. One of the other things that we're finding is that the protein structures actually help encapsulate some of the starches and prevent retrogradation. So very, very interesting. The next slide over, the next picture, is a hemp milk that we've made. And what I wanted to illustrate here was the foam that can be created through steaming. So you make a hemp milk, not only is it incredibly neutral in its flavor, very, very dairy reminiscent. There's the, I was going to say we've got some versions that have a little bit of residual oil in them as well, and they have a wonderful creamy flavor that kind of is just, again, very dairy-like. Hemp oil, the specific oils in hemp, it's a very low molecular weight oil. It's a very small molecule and similar to dairy oil, dairy fats. And so there's kind of a creamy effect there that you get that's really quite nice. Moving over, those pretzels, what we wanted to kind of demonstrate there was the impact of the amino acids in the hemp on the Maillard reaction. As I make gluten-free products, obviously what I'm trying to do is emulate wheat-based products. I want the consumer, the person eating this, to really feel like they're getting a real piece of bread. And so the Maillard reaction is obviously a part of that. And it's just very interesting that the specific amino complex in hemp ends up creating very similar flavors and colors as to what you would see in a normal wheat-based product. To kind of illustrate that further, I got this next slide. I was producing these pretzels on a line in Indiana, and Plymouth, Indiana, specifically. And we were running gluten-based pretzels on one line and gluten-free pretzels on a line in the next room. So I grabbed some of the gluten-based pretzels. Those are the top 3 you see in my hand there. And yes, I'm not wearing gloves in the factory, but that's okay. The bottom 3 are gluten-free and with the addition of hemp. And so the reason we were adding hemp in this formula specifically was to capitalize on its pseudo-emulsification properties. That prior slide, I should have mentioned this before. I'll go back just very quickly to mention this. This mayonnaise down below, where I got this little caption: 10 grams of hemp protein is emulsifying, in this case, 300 grams of oil. So the pseudo-emulsification properties of the hemp are quite amazing. And so in this particular formula, we were looking to replace lecithin. We wanted to get the sunflower lecithin out, and we wanted to try to use hemp for that purpose. So we started at around 2 bakers percent, which is about 1.5% true in this type of formulation. And we got good results there, but we wanted to see how little we could add and get the same effect. And so we started taking it down. We found that with only 0.5% addition of hemp to that formula, that we ended up with a Maillard reaction that was almost identical to wheat, and also a flavor impact, even at that smallest level. So this slide, kind of speaking to some of the functionality, we test and play with all different types of hemp extractions, and we've played with all different types of solvents. We favor obviously the clean solvents. We're going down the road of organic ethanol extraction with a refunctionalization step right behind it. The solvents do denature the protein slightly as you extract it, but as long as they have not been heat denatured, they can be refunctionalized. And so we go through that process. We've also played with CO2. My discovery there has been that the high pressures associated with liquefying the CO2 actually have a damaging effect on the proteins. So I do a little bit less of that, but those types of processes, that process in particular, yields a very bright white, high quality protein. So nutritively, it's great. In some cases, I want less functionality out of the hemp. And so I really kind of favor those types of extractions for formulas where I'm looking to build in nutrition, but I don't necessarily want those egg-like, structures to overpower the formulation. Something like a pretzel, for instance, where I want the starches to really be the focal point, for mouthfeel and everything else. In low pressure extrusion systems like that, crackers and pretzels, too high of a protein content can lead to a rather hard bite. And so I'm always trying to make I'm trying to balance these factors and effects. And so a protein specific for that, where you're seeing a little bit of protein denaturing, I think is a good thing. These images here, we're really just testing the foaming capacity of the hemp. We're testing the gel strength after we've baked it, and then we're performing a hydration test. So there's all these little tests that we'll perform internally. And we've got various pieces of equipment too that will really kind of aid and assist in that. So that, because at the end of the day, we're looking for consistent results. So these pictures, all bred, obviously. All of these formulations utilize hemp primarily. These are all gluten free, and they all utilize the hemp primarily as the egg replacer. And we've got lots of partner brands that are going to be releasing products into the marketplace this year and going into next year that contain hemp. So what's really exciting is that you are going to be seeing at shelf multiple products with hemp in the very, very near future. And it's kind of a cascading effect. As we introduce these ingredients, these variations of hemp protein to specific manufacturers, they are finding that it is solving problems for them. I mentioned the enhancement to shelf life in the bread. That's one. But there's others as well. And I guess too, I can mention a little bit about, relative ratios of hemp and how much you add in for those types of things. If anybody's got questions about that, you can certainly put it in the chat. But I'll kind of talk through it a little bit as well. I find that in most formulations for bread, I don't like to go over about 20% hemp. Because it just ends up being too much. The globular protein coagulates at around 170 degrees, so higher than egg would, but this is good in gluten-free formulations, truly, because I'll get additional volume up until the point that it sets. We do get good expansion in the products, but once the protein, if at higher concentrations, once that protein starts to coagulate, you do see a slight reduction in volume as the proteins kind of aggregate and collapse a little bit. So obviously we have done just about every type of bakery product you can imagine. These tortilla chips are actually mostly hemp, and what we're doing is we nixtamalize the hemp. So we're putting in a giant steep tanks with calcium hydroxide. There's not much starch in the hemp to swell, but they do swell a little bit. Those relative percentages, about 5% starch, 5% fiber, give or take. So we do see some swelling of the starch, and it does form a dough when we subject it to the calcium hydroxide. The other interesting thing is that it tends to you get a good amount of rheology in the dough, but then you get this really nice flavor development. It's a very, very cool process. These chips end up tasting very similar to corn chips. You don't get the corn flavor, obviously, but they're very sweet and nutty and very neutral in their flavor. Over here on the right, you see a band full of low-pressure extruded pretzels. They're being cut with the guillotine on the inside of the cage there and laying down on the belt. These actual pretzels you'll see in a bag with one of our partners here in a couple of minutes, one of the slides. And we're excited because, again, we're seeing hemp really make its way into common foods. There's no reason to necessarily call it out. It's a functional ingredient, but we're using it, primarily for these specific, structural purposes. Foam stability, this is obviously a meringue. Technically, it's a pavlova. So we keep it a little bit soft. It's an underbaked meringue, I guess you could call it. If you look at the meringue on the whisk there, you notice it's not as stiff as egg whites. And I think that really speaks to the higher level of globulin. It does, it kind of sags a little bit, as we would say in the bakery industry. On the pictures on the top right, you see that I've kind of piped it out, and I've used a star tip to illustrate that it kind of just melts in a little bit. It doesn't really hold the peak. Baking, that star pattern has kind of disappeared entirely. But if you look at the bottom right picture, you can see the structure on the inside. It is incredibly delicious. This formulation is literally just hemp protein, water, and sugar. So the pavlova taste amazing. They look great. They function for all intents and purposes identically to their egg counterpart, just without the allergen. We're heavily into pastas. We're actually looking at bringing these products to market, potentially under our own brand, future endeavor. But we've come up with a really special formulation. So here on the left, we've got a kind of a chow mein, if you will. The noodles are hemp. This formulation of hemp pasta is 30 grams of protein per serving. So on a 100-gram dry basis, you boil that 100 grams, it becomes 220 grams, which is essentially a full bowl of pasta. That serving, 100 grams, is 30 grams of protein, only 30 net carbs and 20 grams of prebiotic fiber. Has the same al dente chew as a regular wheat-based pasta, and that is partially due to the hemp protein. That globular protein, once it's cooked, gives you this amazing chew. The bite is phenomenal. So that same chew or that bite is communicated through what looks to be pork on top of that chow mein. It's actually more hemp. That's our textured hemp protein. In this case, we did flavor it to taste more like pork. That was what we were going for. The center pictures there, we've got a chicken crumble like enchilada with actual hemp cheese on it as well. And then the tortilla itself, we made that with hemp. The meatballs that you see there, those are lamb flavored, lamb and beef flavored, but they are all hemp. So again, going back to the fact that you know, when you texturize the hemp, it forms these really wonderful textures, reminiscent of meat structure. We pair the hemp sometimes with other proteins to achieve various results. In this case, with the meatballs, we paired it with pea protein, where we wanted a little bit more of a firm bite, less chicken-like, more beef-like. So, you know, it kind of speaks to the versatility of hemp, being able to stack it with other proteins to achieve various results. On the right, we have a picture of our ravioli. The shell of the ravioli is, again, our hemp pasta. But on the inside there, we've got our hemp ricotta. So, you know, going back to the glutamine levels in hemp, they sit at about 19% of the total amino complex. Dairy proteins are like 21% glutamine. So you've got a lot of crossover flavor with dairy products. Treated in the right way, you can create hemp-based, you know, dairy alternatives that are on par flavor-wise with dairy. Really great levels of functionality, as I demonstrated before with that foam. You know, you can do, if a barista at Starbucks got our hemp milk, you would be hard pressed to tell it wasn't just dairy milk. And the foam is almost identical. So, kind of keep going on. We did a dinner here in our Colorado location 2 years ago. I believe 2 years ago, maybe 3. Been here a while. We'll call it 2 years ago. We did an 11-course fine dining experience entirely based on hemp. Every single course was primarily hemp. Obviously, the focus was hemp. And so in this cucumber salad, we've got a breaded hemp goat cheese, quote unquote, goat cheese. Texture, though, and flavor came off exactly like goat cheese. It was really, really quite nice. And we put sprouted hemp seeds on top. This shepherd's pie, the second one over, we did what we called an inside-out shepherd's pie. So it was the meat, quote unquote, meat on the outside, and it was stuffed with mashed potatoes on the inside. So we used a Rion co-extruder, a KN, to build these. And then we made a hemp demi-glace and then put, of course, the carrots and peas around the outside. The tagliatelle, again, it's that hemp pasta. We did shaved truffle with this, and then we did a hemp cheese, like a cremini hemp cheese, you know, and then the cream sauce. Just really, really amazing flavors. Hemp lends itself well to desserts as well. That is a little miniature pitive. Pitive is basically a puff pastry. And so this is a hemp-based puff pastry, gluten-free. And on the inside, we did a frangipan. So frangipan is normally made with almonds and sugar, and you bake like a paste. In this case, I did a hemp frangipan. So I toasted hemp seeds, I combined them with sugar, and I made this particular paste on the inside. It was really, really wonderful. And then, you know, aside from the cherry compote there in the middle, there's a hemp-based chantilly on the right. And so, again, speaking to the functionality of hemp, this one protein can emulsify and make a mayonnaise, or it can be whipped into a whipped cream, but then it can also make a meringue at the same time. And I mean, I challenge you to find other proteins, especially plant-based proteins, that will do that. Again, just speaking to the versatility, it's quite amazing. So these are some of the products that we'll be seeing coming into the market this year. Again, what hemp is doing in every one of these is slightly different. In the case of the breads, it's an egg replacer. In the case of the pasta, it's a feature. So we're talking about a huge amount of hemp, and then that hemp is specifically adding to the bite, as well as obviously carrying a large portion of the flavor. And the pasta eats so well, the flavor is so good. But what really rounds it out are those beautiful textures that are reminiscent of a real pasta. The other thing that's interesting too is that most gluten-free pastas tend to fall apart in the water, and they don't hold well, they don't retort well. And so what's very cool about this pasta is that you can parboil it. So for a restaurant setting, this is incredibly important. You can parboil it, you can pre-portion it and hold it, and then you can flash it to order. So a restaurant could take it, put it in the fridge, and when they have a customer that requests a gluten-free pasta, they could bring this out and they could just put it right into the sauce, reheat, and then serve immediately fresh. So again, just it's so cool that a single ingredient will have so many levels of functionality. These pretzels you saw on the pretzel band a little bit earlier, and then we have our other partner on the right that's likewise released a pretzel, but in this case the hemp is really driving the nutritional profile. Going back to the fact that we don't want a lot of functionality in that hemp, we want it to just have a neutral flavor and color, and then supply a great amount of nutrition. We stacked various proteins into that pretzel so that we could kind of increase the overall PDCAS. Hemp has, and Kim will speak to most of this, but hemp has a PDCAS of about 0.65. So in many cases, we'll want to stack other proteins in there to make up the difference in aminos. And then, yeah, I'll let Kim go from here. She'll really just jump in and talk about the nutrition.
Awesome. Thank you. I know I already have questions for you and I get to see you every day. But kind of continuing on from this CPG highlight, over the last couple of years, protein is really king in the industry. And along with making protein content claims on the front of packaging, the FDA requires that you calculate the % daily value and then put that on the nutrition fact label on the back of your package. And the question kind of all ties into protein quality. And with this protein % daily value, Chadwick alluded to PDCAS, which stands for Protein Digestibility Corrected Amino Acid Score. And so what's being corrected for is really what still ties into this complete protein. So hemp is considered a complete protein source, meaning that it contains all 9 essential amino acids. So out of 20 total amino acids, 9 of which have to be consumed from our diet. And protein quality now is more than just a number on the back of a package or on the front panel. It's really taking 2 things into account. It's taking into account the composition of these essential amino acids, along with the bioavailability and this digestibility score that is determined on how well we're able to actually break down, process, and utilize these amino acids in our body. So for hemp, and Chadwick already alluded to it a bit, so they're able to calculate this digestibility score. So for a dehulled or a hemp heart, it's around, and the scale is, the max you can get is 1. So dehulled, just regular hemp seeds, is at about 0.87, and then hemp heart flour, hemp proteins is around that 9.4 to 9.6 amount as well. So why does this matter? It's important because the fact that not all proteins are considered complete. Animal-based sources typically are, but plant proteins, it varies, and it lends to this concept of protein stacking. And how can we combine different types of plant proteins, not only from a functional perspective, but also making sure that we're getting all these essential amino acids. For hemp in particular, our limiting amino acid is lysine. And the way I like to think about a limiting amino acid, because that's also what's getting corrected in this digestibility score to determine your percent daily value, is it kind of like a car analogy. You could have 20 tires, 5 motors, 4 windshields, but if you only have one steering wheel, production ceases after that one car is made. So if you're not ingesting enough of these essential amino acids, the building blocks for protein really cease before they even begin. So this is really critical. Continuing on, Chadwick has already mentioned this adestin. So adestin is the globular seed storage protein inherent to hemp, and it's really unique and special to hemp in particular. So it's about 65%. The remaining would be that albumin, and the globular form, and Chadwick mentioned that there's some around 70% solubility, along with this fact that it closely mimics the serum globulins already in our blood. So this resemblance upon ingesting makes it easier for our body to actually break down, and therefore views it to be significantly lower risk of an allergen. So now, as of January 2025, sesame is now the 9th top allergen per the FDA. And it really limits some of these allergen-free and gluten-free options when you're trying to create a nutrient-dense, delicious food product. So this, the globular nature of the protein is beneficial on many different levels. And then we have a picture here on the right, which is our cold-pressed hemp heart oil that we make at our facility. And you can see it's a beautiful kind of golden yellow color. And hemp oil is a polyunsaturated fat. So due to the some of the double bonds throughout the molecule, it's a little bit more susceptible to oxidation and rancidity. But of that fat content, about 70% of that is omegas. And it's really wonderful that a plant-based product is able to contribute this much omega to the overall kind of diet from a whole food source. And even better, it has the optimal ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. So that ratio ideally would be 1 part omega-3 to around 6 part omega-6s. Typically in the Western diet, it's been getting pretty well known for having elevated omega-6 levels, which tip your body more into a pro-inflammatory state versus when you consume, that ideal ratio of omega-3s into a more, not necessarily anti-inflammatory, but it's keeping that inflammation at bay. Some of the other seed oils and like sunflower oil, for example, have about 14 parts omega-6 to 1 part omega-3. So whether or not saying that it's bad, but it does tip you into that pro-inflammatory kind of reaction, because when you're eating anything with omegas, you're only really able to convert 16 to 20%, different than an animal source. But for this situation, you really want to make sure that you're kind of stacking those omega-3s so that you're able to keep your body in a less inflamed state. And then just due to that sensitive nature of the oil, the smoke point is around 320 to 330 degrees Fahrenheit, and making it more of a culinary-based oil than something you'd want to cook with. And next slide, please. Awesome. And then this is one of our favorite graphics that we've done. So the name of the pasta that we had developed previously was called Pro Pasta. And I love this graph because it shows a great example of protein stacking. So in our hemp protein pasta, there's also pea protein. So it's comparing 100 grams of dried pasta to 100 grams of chicken breast. And you can just see this amino acid composition in general is pretty balanced. So there are ways that you can create a plant-based product that is comparable to an animal source, highlighting that glutamic acid and the glutamine from the flavor and umami that Chadwick mentioned. Some of the alanine is really great. And in lieu of time, we'll just skip to the next slide as well. Awesome. And then real quick, just trends and claims that are typical now in the food and CPG, kosher, halal. Actually, consumers tend to view a product that's kosher to inherently be more healthy. Whether or not that's true is regardless, keto, low carb, seed oil free, vegan. But one of the topics that is near and dear to us is this contamination on the field for gluten. So in our line of work, we're always trying to be, very mindful of the parts per million of the hemp that we're receiving. So typically it's getting cross-contaminated, or the field is getting rotated with rye, wheat, and barley. So just being very aware as a grower and a farmer of hemp, that we here at Nepra and other food companies really value a gluten-free source, or happy to walk through and talk about how we might be able to collaborate on something like this. Which lends to our kind of call to action. So we would love for you to continue supporting brands that are using hemp in the marketplace, some of which we were featured today. Educate others about the benefits of industrial hemp, both functionally and nutrition-wise. And then this last one of research roles focused on hemp seed genetics is something that is also really important for us, because not only is there opportunities to create hemp genetics that maybe are higher in protein, but also kind of highlighting some other varietals. And Chuck, do you have anything to add about the genetic component?
Yeah, I think crop yield is a big one. We've done so much genetic work around cannabinoids and so much work around fiber, and some great fiber varietals out there, but they all only produce around 12 to 1,700 pounds of grain per acre. We really need varietals that are pushing the limit and producing closer to like 3,200 to 4,000 pounds of grain per acre. And I think that at those levels, we would really see the economics begin to open up. So obviously we're very interested in that, but we're interested in working with groups that have these capabilities to really start pushing what, we need food varietals. That's really what we need. We need to improve on the size of the seed if possible. Get larger size, more consistent seed, possibly even playing with protein ratios in the seed. If we can get higher levels of protein, offsetting the oil, perhaps, then the yields of protein will be higher and the economics come down further. One of the things we didn't really talk about is the price of hemp compared to other proteins. And pea protein, for instance, is, I won't talk about soy because soy is subsidized, right? So it's kind of artificially low price, if you ask me. And then you got huge factories built for soy. We don't really see that with the other plant-based proteins, except for pea. Pea's really, mass produced. But pea protein's about $3.50 to $3.75 a pound. And we need hemp to be on the same level. And this is really kind of how we do it. We do it through genetics, and we do it through agricultural processes that are prone or capable of yielding higher levels or higher amounts of grain. And that is it. So now we'll talk. Well, of course, I talk too much, so we don't have very many questions we can answer at this point. But let's see, we got the Q&A.
Yeah, we have 14 questions right now, so please go ahead.
So first question is, since it's gluten-free, does it rise like bread and wheat? The answer is no. It does because of its similarity to the functionality of eggs. You could pre-whip it and you could add it into a batter-based formula, and you could get some pretty great volume that way. But typically speaking, no, it forms a rigid structure within the bread, kind of bolstering and holding up the starches as they cool. So you think about starches, they gel anywhere between 165 and 175 degrees Fahrenheit. They're completely gelled by around 180. As the bread comes out of the oven, it's really quite soft. Because there's no gluten in a gluten-free bread, you're lacking the structure. So that protein structure sets in a rigid form, and it prevents the starches from collapsing back on themselves. So that's really the benefit there. So have you experimented with hemp in a bulk ferment process similar to sourdough? Yes, and the flavor results are amazing. I would definitely try that. such a mild flavored protein. It suits itself very well, but there's some interesting flavors that are developed in this case. So I would definitely try it. Really, really pleasant sour. It's this next question. Have you found that some industrial hemp seed varietals are better than others? You know, yes and no. We tend to play mostly with Fanola. Some of our Canadian partners are producing X59. We've gotten Carmagnola, we've gotten a few others that are they all seem to be fairly similar. This is again, I think a huge body of work that needs to be done as we start identifying, all of these strains, which ones. And by the way, they might not be hemp strains that have the best levels of functionality. I have seen some marijuana strains that the seeds have incredible functionality. So what kind of future work could really be done around hybridizing and, first of all, isolating the proteins, making a judgment around functionality, chasing down which attributes might be the best for food systems, and then hybridizing, to get the appropriate genetics in the field for these purposes. Next question, how much time does it take for you guys to create formulations for other companies? It's dependent on the formula. We have thousands of formulas in whole, just waiting for somebody to ask us for one. So sometimes those formulations will be, turned around very quickly. Average time, I would say, is probably 3 to 6 months to really go through the entire process. If you want to include scale up in a factory and those types of things, there's additional time that's tacked onto that. And it's really just it's a matter of going back and forth and making sure that, the customer is happy with the formulation first and foremost. And then it goes into consumer testing. And that's where a lot of the tweaking is done. And then, of course, there's final tweaking done at the factory. Oh, so what hemp seed characteristics would I like hemp breeders to focus on? I've kind of said some of this already, but I'm protein content, protein quality, seed size, yield per acreage. Those are, I think, the big ones. I'm very interested in the oil too. I'm not trying to discount the oil at all, but we use a lot less of the oil than we do of the protein for our specific purposes. So. So this question, did you say that the hemp flour is derived from the hemp hearts? Yes, it is. And it's not boiled and separated. We don't want to cook the protein or else it's denatured. So we want to gently separate the two. So we put them in we run it through a colloidal mill, basically, or a shear mixer, and then we create essentially a wet puree of hemp solids and water. And then, of course, the oil starts to separate. And then we use enzymes to further get out, release the oil. These are all done at lower temperatures, right? Because we're trying to maintain the functionality of the protein. And so it's a very gentle process that we're going through. And that's really what's important here. Try to treat the protein appropriately. Separating the edestin and albumin. Well, I don't really go through that separation, but we've talked about it. Albumin's water soluble, so there's that. But edestin is salt soluble, so you can actually extract you can get the edestin to bind to the salts, and then the albumin will stay. It'll precipitate out at that point. You can separate it. The albumin stays in the water, and then you can go through a drying process for that if you wish. So that's the simple answer. It's a little more complicated than that, but. Salt precipitation is the answer. So what is the omega 3 to 6 ratio? It's about 3 to 1. So you got 3 parts LA to 1 part ALA. I manufacture the hemp oil and protein. I also make the hemp feed for laying hens. Oh, cool. I have not really delved into animal nutrition, so I'm not very well equipped to answer that question, unfortunately. But I've got some friends in the San Luis Valley here in Colorado that are making feed for hens, and they're growing varietals of Fanola. So, and then we've got a company here in Colorado, New West Genetics, and they have introduced a new strain into the marketplace called Amplify. And I've seen lots of farmers in the state trying to play with that one. So I think it's just, trying to identify new varietals is going to be important. Specifically too for the latitudes where these products are being grown. So when this question's good because I mentioned 4,000 pounds of grain per acre. So that is for the whole grain, hull on, assuming that once we dehull it, we're losing about 40 to 50% of the weight. I'd like to see a larger seed size so that ratio goes down. So we're getting larger hearts in relation to the hull. I think that's very important. But then based on that, then we're looking at about, once we've taken the oil out, which is again 50% of the heart, so you're losing 40 to 50% of the hull off the top, the weight there, and then you're taking half of the heart is oil, so you're only left with about 34% protein at the end of it. So those are the ratios that I'd like to see increased, more protein. Yeah, so this question is around the egg market and the avian flu, and are we seeing ingredient demand appear for egg replacement? Yes, that is the short answer. Yes, we are. And, we know that hemp will do this effectively. And, you can modify, there's ultrasonic, cross-linking, there's other processes for cross-linking, proteins, and you can fully solubilize the hemp. There's a lot of really cool things that you can do with it to enhance the level of functionality and make it better for egg replacement. And we have not really concentrated very much on this, but we have played a little bit around actual egg replacement for home cooks, being able to form a liquid similar to like Just Eggs formulation. They use, of course, mung bean protein that's been hydrolyzed. We have played a little bit with hemp proteins in this regard, and we've had amazing results. Really, really great textures, soft, creamy gels that have a very, very pleasant flavor at the same time without any flavor additions. The highest cooking temperature for powder and oil. With the oil, I'd be very careful. I would not deep fry in it. To cook with it is fine. Just try to stay within that, stay below the smoke point. Again, that smoke point is around 320 to 330 degrees. So Fahrenheit. So we want to make sure that, it stays below that, or else you start damaging the omegas, and that's not good. So the protein itself coagulates around 170 degrees Fahrenheit. I wouldn't say that there's a high end. You just be concerned about burning. I think of baked goods in the oven, they'd get a little too dark if you're not careful. Yeah, that's about it. So I see a question around working with NIHC. No, we are not currently, but we do have lots of projects with it, in official capacities that we're following up on. And obviously we're really trying to drive the hemp industry here. We really want to see the greater industry come into its own. I want grain at good prices. That's what I want. And today's prices make it very difficult to get the protein extracted in an economical way. I have to be highly cognizant as a product developer of what the shelf price of, the consumer price of these finished goods is going to be. And if a protein is too expensive, I just simply can't use it, at least not to the degree that I would like to. Every ingredient that you use has its own relative percentage with which it's used in a formulation, right? And so with hemp, I like it to be around that 30% value. It goes all the way down to like, 0.5%, as I showed in the example, using it to improve the Maillard reaction. But, if I have a formulation where it demands 30% hemp, I can't put it in there if it's $15 a pound. So, if I can get it down closer to the price of pea protein, that's the goal.
Well, thank you so much for this amazing talk and for answering all of our questions. We're wrapping up for today's webinar. It has been recorded and we will upload it to our School of Integrative Plant Science, SIPS, YouTube channel. And I wish all of you a great rest of the week. Thank you.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.